Good morning, everyone. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homelands of the Métis Nation. All individuals entering city-operated facilities, including City Hall, are required to wear a non-medical face mask. Those at the table are not required to wear masks while sitting as long as they're distanced 6 feet from anyone else. Once you leave your seat at the table, you must put your mask back on. As directed by Manitoba Health, we're requesting people avoid close contact within 2 meters with anyone showing symptoms of respiratory illness such as coughing or sneezing. If you are experiencing flu-like symptoms, we are requesting that you excuse yourself from the room. Michael, are you on?
I'm here.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I would like to introduce the members of the panel. To my left is Carrie Linklater, and to her left is Richard Whitburn. My name is Brent McIntyre, and I'll be chairing the hearing today. We have 2 assessors, Michael Taylor on Zoom, David Penner in person, and our secretary is Michelle Neepan. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matter must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Use of cell phones is not permitted except for approval by the chair. Thank you very much. I guess we should close the door. Swear it. Affirm. A little louder so we can hear it.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Morning, Mr. Assessor.
Morning.
You make them stand.
Can you state your name, please? Sorry, can you state your full name?
Mike Taylor.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. The first item on the docket is 759 St. Mary's Road, and I understand, Michael, there's a preliminary issue?
Yep. Just the request for non-compliance.
And you can read the details of the property into evidence.
Sure.
I'll just let me get there first.
Okay. Let me know when you're there.
Okay, I'm there.
Okay, great. So for 759 St. Mary's Road, we have file number 20-458, roll number 08001 802 000. Proposed 2021 assessed value at $790,000 and request address burden of proof be placed on applicant. Just there. Applicants own the property since 2013. They did send us a sales mailer and a mailer in 2015, but failed to send in the 2017 mailer, which is included on pages, I guess 8 all the way through 12. So you have on page 11 is the envelope, page 12 is the tracking showing the owner signed for it at the address on file. If you have any other questions, let me know.
Thank you. And Rocky, how do you want to respond?
Just clarify one or two small issues here. The envelope, page 11.
Mm-hmm.
Do you take copies of these before they're sent out?
Me personally, I don't.
Not you, but the department. I'm just wondering how the process works. You don't have the actual envelopes, right?
I don't know. I don't have the actual envelope. No.
Okay. No, but and you don't run.
I'm guessing someone would take a copy of it or scan a copy of these envelopes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the letter on page 9 and 10. 8, 9, and 10. This is what was in a copy of what was in the envelope.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the tracking number at the top of page 8 should match the tracking number on the envelope. LP 578606.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Now, but was that tracking number in place, or was that put in after the fact?
That would all be put in place. This is just copies of what was sent to the envelope.
But that's not your tracking number. That's the post office tracking number, right?
Yeah. You
don't get that till you actually mail it, right?
I think that we prepay for these envelopes. Again, I'm not 100%.
Oh, okay. And thank you. That's all I wanted to ask. So you've got the envelope and a copy of the letter and the signature of receipt.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We will take a short recess.
So I'm just wondering why that would be.
The address is different on the mailer, 761 versus 759. So
I'm just wondering why the difference.
the difference is, well, there's the two, I guess, legal addresses for this on file. The owner, when she purchased the property in 2013, specifically sent in her 2013 information that she wants it addressed to 761 because she occupies that unit.
Okay, thank you.
And I have no questions. Okay, I'll have to ask the gentleman to leave the room while we deliberate.
You didn't ask. I didn't.
You did.
No, you didn't ask. Yes, I had questions, and I had questions.
Oh, I thought that was it for you.
No, well, it is it, but
Okay.
it is it. I was just,
Being different. The board has discussed this, and we have granted the assessor's request that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation under section 53(3)B of the MAA, and that if a reduction in assessment is ordered, that it follows section 54(3.2) of the MAA. Rocky, you're on top.
I was just wondering what took so long. Did you order takeout food or something like that?
Do you see any food here? No.
All right. So this is a retail building on St. Mary's Road, kind of typical of the storefront style on St. Mary's, and built in 1988. One of the units is rented, the other unit is the owner's. So the one that's rented is the spa unit, and the gross rent is $25.67 per square foot. We've calculated that at $16.85, so that's the actual paid rent on the spa unit. And the rent we've applied to the larger unit is $15 because this is just looking at the achieved rents, the economy of scale as well. And in support of that, we have several rents in here somewhere on page 4 are a number of what we would call miscellaneous style rents in and around the city. I was looking for some in specific here nearby. So we had some at the bottom of the page on St. Mary's nearby at $15.77 for a smaller unit, and some on St. Anne's, which is a few blocks away between $9.67 and $14. So the $15 rate would be fair for this site. In terms of vacancy, we've used the same number as the assessor, and that's because our own market research indicated that was supportable. For what they call other, we'll call structural reserve, we're reverting to a rate per square foot because structural reserve is reserve generally used for roof replacement. So a rate of 25 cents a square foot for the shortfall, not the shortfall, sorry, the structural reserve. That is fairly similar to what the assessor has put in. It's actually lower. And then in terms of non-recoverables, we're using a standard rate of 5%, and that's supported by our study at the back. All properties have non-recoverables. And as I keep saying, with the stroke of the pen, the assessor can't obliterate 100 years of practice just because they choose 1 year to do it. It's not the way it's done. If you're calling yourself following market, you got to follow the market. Lastly, on shortfall, our numbers will vary because we're using actuals again, and we did get the statements from the owner. And so the actual cost to occupy are $882 a square foot. And you can see that the math is $25.67 on the gross rent, $16.85 net rent should be exactly that amount, leaving us an NOI of $45,740. And as far as capitalization, we're looking at, this is what would be called miscellaneous retail. This is not a good investment property. Mistakenly, people put low cap rates on these, and the reason why, and as you may know, I am a certified designated appraiser, and generally what we see people trying to do is manufacture a cap rate when a property is sold on the basis of its square footage. Now, a little place like this will be marketed and sold based on direct comparison approach. They're not sold as investment properties. And as a result, if you try to put a cap rate on it, it's going to come artificial. It'll be artificial, it'll be wrong. So when you look to the market for cap rates, you can't stick a low one on just so you can match your sale price from direct comparison. On the basis of equity, of method of assessment, you have to look at the general market cap rates. And this one is above the range. You see that we put the Collier's range on this, in this document on page way up there, the blue pages. Sorry, I'm page 24 to 26, and those studies would never envision the selection of this as a cap rate. So it will be inferior to anything shown here. Those are investment grade. There's some further discussion on this on page 29 of the methods of cap rates are calculated by, And on page 32 to 34 is a general discussion of application of cap rates and where they should generally fall on properties. As I'm saying, it's not a great investment property, so it's going to cap higher, not lower because it's smaller, higher because it's not a desirable investment property. And the reason being is that it's a local user. Local users close their doors all the time, and you're left with large vacancies. So it's not of general interest in the investment market, and therefore it ends up getting capped higher. The other issues with it have to do with the parking. With today's zoning requirements, the limited parking that it has wouldn't meet the parking bylaw, which is also in here. It is what's called illegal non-conforming parking at the current time. So if they don't change their use, there won't be a requirement. But again, a good property with a good cap rate is going to have adequate parking. And the reason isn't physical. The reason is the market. When you look at an alternate user who's prepared to pay good rent, they're going to want to have good parking. This won't attract it. Now, I can't read my comparables because it's way too small on my phone. Page 40, 39 and 40, there are a number of comparables in this range, and they're from 8% to 10%. So this follows in that area. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Michael, any questions?
Yeah, just a question about the sale back in 13. Sold for more than what you're asking for today. Is there a reason that the value went down since the sale in 2013?
Owner occupant. It wasn't an investment sale. I believe that the owner was a tenant in the facility and purchased it. So it's not a reliable indicator of market.
But she did have an appraisal done, at least according to my notes. Did you do the appraisal on the subject property?
What notes? Is
No,
that in your evidence?
No, I'm just talking verbally about the notes in our system that there was an appraisal done on it when she purchased it.
I have no idea.
But you didn't do it. That's what you're saying.
You know what? I wouldn't even answer that question if I had done it or I hadn't done it, because A, it's not relevant, B, it's private. It's got nothing to do with the assessment. They're two different numbers. But off the record, I did not have no knowledge of it whatsoever.
Okay, great. You talked about price per square foot too, being more valuable, or sorry, more appropriate indicator of value on properties like the subject. Then
Yeah, that would generally be the way that they would end up. The greatest reliance would be for a market appraisal, this style of property, and for participants.
okay, great. But you didn't put any sales, like direct sales, to look at for us today.
Well, that's because of the jurisdictional exception. The board applies the income approach to all properties, and coming in with direct comparison approach is been rejected several times. I can tell you a municipal board case where the board mistakenly thought I was relying on it, and they just misheard it. But it was 2675 Portage. We brought it in for support.
All right, yeah.
It's a problem.
Or you made a statement about it, and I'm just.
Yeah, no. What I'm saying is that it's the backwards method of cap rate application, and that's what I was talking about. People use it and they go backwards and think, oh, see, we'll use that sale price, and therefore it has a cap that's reflected. That's not the reason they were sold. If you're going to do cap rate analysis, it has to be sold for the same purposes, which is an investment purpose, and then you can compare cap rates. I believe that is in my report.
Yeah. And then, yeah, just comparables. I just had a question about the one comparable you had. That seems like the most appropriate one on your page 4. It's at the very bottom, 741 St. Mary's Road.
Right.
Just you've indicated it's 1577, and I think we have the exact same comparable included in the brief here for the assessor. Is 1675. So I'm just wondering why there's a difference, because you have the lease start date being September 15th, and we have October 16th.
Give me 1 second. I don't know if you heard this. I made a mistake this morning. I forgot to bring my file. This was based on an appraisal our office had done of the site. And I believe you might be referring to gross rents. That's just my, all I have in front of me right now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But you know what, really, 1675 is not, out of line, with our valuation either. Our paid rent was very similar to that on our small unit.
I think that's all his questions. Is that correct?
That was it.
Thank you, Michael. Carrie, any questions?
I have no questions.
Richard?
No, thank you.
I have one question. I'm looking at the aerial view. There is parking on Inman. Rocky?
Yes, there's parking on the in the back lane. That you're saying that paved area?
I'm looking at the picture on your page 2.
You got a better picture. The aerial.
And on page 2, there's a curb cut there making a parking lane. Not part of Inman the street, but an additional parking lane. Is that not correct?
Oh, yeah, but that's not subject property.
No, but is there any restrictions?
That's city parking.
Yeah, but there's no meters here.
No, but, okay, you don't have the right to use city square footage to satisfy your parking bylaw requirements unless you do so by variance and prove that it's not going to be a burden on the neighborhood. So you don't control it.
No, you don't control it, but can patrons coming to either facility here park there?
Anyone can park there.
Okay, that was my only
But
question.
it's not part of the legal rights that are being appraised.
No, you mentioned parking was a problem. In your testimony.
What I said is on an investment perspective, to look at an alternate user who's going to attract a high rent, they will want control of their own parking. They won't want to rely on city parking because they don't control it and they don't have the right to use it all day long. It is a limitation, a time limitation as well on that side street. And it doesn't count on their legal rights package.
Okay, I think you've answered the question. That's fine. Michael, do you want to begin your presentation?
Sure. I'll just preface it off with, I just kind of parachuted in here, another assessor in the building. So the report wasn't generated by me. So if you guys have questions, you can give me some patience or have some patience for me just to get to the answer. Anyways, kind of went over all the formalities for the property before, but again, the assessed value is $790,000. One building on site. We have it broken into 3 units, built in 1988. We have a leasable area today of 3,530 square feet. Sorry, flipping over to page 2, we do have that the property is sold a couple times in the last little bit. First sale being in 2008 for $480,000, and then the second sale being in 2013 for $595,000. Page 3 just shows the aerial views of the subject property. And then some street view pictures from Google on page 4. We have rental comparables for the subject on page 5. Just looking at similar vintages of buildings, I guess, and sizes down in the south end on St. Mary's Road. And the comparable on Britannica is just a strip mall just off St. Mary's Road. Page 6 has the mass appraisal valuation for the subject property. So the model rents there that vary from $14.70 a square foot up to $18.61 a square foot to get to that gross potential rent of $60,646. If you blend the rents over the leasable area, it comes out to an average rent of $17.18 a square foot. Applied a vacancy rate of 6%, which is standard for this type of property. Expense being 2%, shortfall being $650 a square foot to get to that net operating income of $54,490, and then a cap rate of 6.9% to get to that $790,000 value. The rest of the information provided to you today is just the non-co-op information and the standard inclusion for the city for cap rate and expenses. Thank you.
Thank you. Rocky, any questions?
Yes. Valuation, page 6 was out by the model.
Yeah.
And then the rents, who selected the rents?
Who selected the rents?
Yeah.
Are you talking about comparables or are you talking about just like the model generated?
I'm sorry, page 5.
Who selected the rents for the comparables?
Yes.
It would be the author of the report, which would have been Mark.
Okay. And these particular comparables, I'm just wondering, you've mentioned the first one was a strip mall.
Yep. Lots of these are multi-tenant comparables.
And what was it? Who is the user? Tenant?
I'm not sure. I don't have it in front of me.
Do you have it for any of the others?
No. Again, appreciate you guys' patience and kind of just pick this up.
No, that's fine. I was just looking at it because we had a hearing a few days ago, and some of these look awfully familiar. I believe 249 St. Mary's isn't that Taco Del Mar?
249 St. Mary's Road?
Yeah.
For the subway there, yeah.
For the subway. Yeah. And 1074 St. Mary's, is that the pizza restaurant?
I am not sure.
Okay. And would it, you have page 6, 3 premises, but your picture shows 2.
Yep. Again, like that when I picked up the file yesterday, for our page 6, if you look, yeah, we have the 3 units. And we have something on file that the owner only occupies that second premise. That's the 2,277 square feet. She only occupies that much space for her business, sorry. And then the remaining one of 423 square feet she doesn't use. So she wanted her for business assessment purposes.
Oh, I see. So you seem to have an awful lot of information. Wondering why you need the questionnaire and the penalty. Now, if you took these 3 premises and actually just applied them as 2 premises, would that change your model number?
It would affect, yeah, economies of scale, probably.
Right. So the larger unit would drop in value, probably an economy of scale.
Yeah, probably.
And in regard to the cap rate, is this model driven? And I'm taking it's from page 13.
Yeah.
In which category in page 13?
Page 13, which category? I don't think we have this one covered underneath that. Retail.
Yeah, you got strip to regional, and I'm just wondering what this would be.
It's not in there. As you can see at the top of page 6, it's just classified as like a general retail.
So it's not a specific.
Not a strip mall. It's not.
Okay. All right. So where does the applied cap rate fall then inside the general retail parameters? Like you've got 20th and 80th percentiles for the rest of these. I'm just wondering where this fits.
Oh, I don't have that information.
Okay. The information on page 18 on Are these being provided to indicate that they're comparable to the subject, or do we take it what it says here? They are only to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model rates. They're not meant to be comparable specific to the subject.
Well, I think you've probably seen this page many times.
No, I just want to clarify for each and every time.
No, it's not being used as specific comparable for the subject.
Okay, because you are aware that there are several on the retail list that first of all sold as a portfolio, and second that were reported by Colliers who said in our submission that these are not suitable for capitalization rates.
Yeah, we've gone through that dance before.
Okay, I know. I like repeating it. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
No, thank you.
Carrie?
No questions,
And I have no questions. Thank you, Michael. That concludes 759 St. Mary's.
Thanks, guys.
The next one is 3740 Portage Avenue. There's a preliminary issue for non-cooperation, and Mr. Neufeld, are you submitting rebuttal?
Later.
But you are submitting it.
Yeah, likely.
It's kind of a yes or no.
No,
question.
I mean, I think that we're in a two-step process. Let's get past the penalty, and then I'll tell you about the rest of the evidence. So not submitting evidence for the penalty issue.
You're not.
Well, not written evidence.
Okay.
May I ask a question? Sure. Please, out of respect for us, when you travel around the room, put your mask on. I would really appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, let's live with it. No, don't roll your eyes. Let's live with it, please.
He's asking a good question.
That's okay. No, that's yes. Don't mistakenly read body language. Don't mistake a reading of body language.
Well,
I'm reading behavior.
No, don't tell me not to roll my eyes at something. I don't like that.
Okay,
that's not right to say.
Thank you.
You don't know what I'm thinking.
That's it.
Thank you.
That's it. And I remind you, Rocky, and you know the limitations on this room. We have to be out of here by 12.
Yes, I understand. That's
So let's
fine.
not get involved in these
No,
discussions.
it's a personal shot. I don't care.
Well, had you been wearing your mask, you probably wouldn't have asked. would you? That's the rule of the room.
Okay. I stand corrected on that matter.
Thank you.
Good morning.
David Thomas George Penner.
You're firm that the other issue was-
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
So the preliminary issue is the shifting of the burden of proof for non-cooperation. Michael, you can proceed. Michael, sorry. I got used to talking to Michael. David, you may proceed.
Okay,
Sorry.
no problem. I thought there was another person presenting. Okay, I'll read the file number. It's 20-346. The roll number is 07569134585. The address is 3740 Portage Avenue. The owner is Questionable Investment Corp. The value in the roll for 2021 is $3.2 million. On the bottom of page 1 is our request for a deferral penalty for non-cooperation. I have reviewed this file and have become aware that there's new ownership of this property as of May the 1st, 2019. And given that the new owner can't be held responsible for the old owner not complying with the 2017 request, we are no longer pursuing the non-compliance penalty.
Thank you. So that matter is dealt with. What was the possession date on that?
I'm told it was May the 1st of 2019.
2019. Any questions, Gary? Richard?
No, thanks.
And Rocky, I don't think you have any questions on this. Thank you. Hey, David, you may proceed.
Okay, I do have another preliminary matter to address, and that is the inclusion of post-reference material in Mr. Neufeld's brief. He includes financial.
Hey, just hang on, let me get there.
Oh, certainly.
What page is that?
In Mr. Neufeld's brief,
Yes.
page 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. State this is clearly post-reference financial material. The reference date is April the 1st, 2018. The mailer covers all of 2018, so goes 9 months past the reference date, and we would ask that the evidence be removed and not considered for this hearing.
So just to, okay, so it's the mailer documents. And it is page 4 to 7, right?
Well, the mailer is page 4 to 7, and the stabilized workout is off that mailer. So it's all part and parcel.
Well, Mr. Neufeld, how would you like to respond?
I think the board could wait a few minutes until I reach that point of the evidence to determine what it's being used for, and then you can put the weight on it deserves.
Okay, we'll take a short recess to deliberate this. Thank you. And we'll resume the meeting. David, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have an issue with the mailer submitted in Mr. Neufeld's brief, as it is at odds with information like the actual 2018 mailer that was submitted to our department. It's different information. So can I be assured that this information will not be relied on in any way?
The board will place the appropriate weight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'll continue with my presentation.
Sorry, can you just repeat that for me? You're saying that the information in the mailer differs from information that was submitted in the 18 mailer, which was submitted in 2019?
That's correct.
Okay. You never cared to ask why then, did you? Okay, thank you.
So I'll continue on. Page 2 just shows our requests for information. We have complete information for 2016. We don't have any information, and that was the basis for our non-compliance request, which we've subsequently dealt with for the fact that there was a new owner. Turning to page 3 is our stabilized income workup based on the 2016 information submitted to us. And we've used a stabilized revenue and expenses to come up with our value. We're using a net operating income of $426,696 Capping that at 12% gives us a value of $3,200,000. This value compares to 2018 and 19, which was at $2,987,000, which was confirmed by the Board of Revision. Page 4 and 5 is a breakdown of the A and G. There was no breakdown, so it's a lump sum for A and G. And we reconciled the numbers on the income statement to the net operating income by adding back non-deductible items such as mortgage interest to come up with the net operating income for appraisal purposes. Page 5 is a listing of cap rates, and as I stated, as for beverage hotels, we're using a cap rate of 12%. Pages 6 and 7 are excerpts from the MAA. Turning to page 8, we have an overhead view. This is the Howard Johnson Express on Portage Avenue, frontage on Portage. More pictures on page 9. Page 10 shows the lounge area. It's a sports bar theme. I believe it's St. Patrick's. The VLT lounge is shown on page 11. And a couple of pictures of one of the suites is shown on page 13. Turning to page 14, this property was recently renovated in 2015. The amenities of the hotel are listed here. The advantages of location, being close to the MTV Iceplex shopping center, close to downtown Winnipeg, and golf facility. Amenities and services are listed at the bottom, including dining and entertainment, as we've seen in the pictures. Turning to page 15, this is the financial statement submitted to us by the old owners, MSLCA Management Limited. If we turn to page 16, we can see they submitted a balance sheet to us, and on page 16 under capital assets, they list the land value at $1 million and the building value at $4,754,000, $5.7 million in total. So the old owners had valued the property on their balance sheet at $5.7 million, which adds some support to our valuation of 3.2. Turning to page 17, looking under long-term liabilities, we see they have a mortgage of 3.8 and some shareholder loans. This totals 5.1 million. As we know, this the owners did sell the property, and we're trying to determine market value, i.e. what they may have sold it for. Certainly, they would not be selling this property for less than 5.1 million, the amount of the outstanding loans. Again, this adds further support to our value, which is conservative at 3.2 million. And turning to page 21 is the mailer submitted to us by the old owners covering the 2016 information. So the evidence shows clearly that at 3.2 million, it's a conservative valuation. Based on the balance sheet value, we think it's more than fair. We ask that the board confirm the value.
Thank you. Rocky, any questions?
Could I have your authorities for relying on a balance sheet to establish ad valorem value?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Your authorities, case law, anyone who's written anything intelligent to say about this, do you have any authorities? Or are you just making this stuff up?
Excuse me?
Are you making this stuff up? I've never seen this before in my life, so it's a work of fiction.
I did not.
You've never seen financial statements?
I've seen lots of financial statements. I've never seen an evaluation based on a financial statement before, so I'm wondering what his authorities are.
Well, the board will place the appropriate weight on this evidence.
Okay, well, just opening a door here. Now, the balance sheet that you've mentioned, was this done by GAAP or IFRS?
I I don't know.
Do you know the difference? Generally acceptable accounting procedures or independent financial review standards. The difference between book value and market value. Do you know how it was done?
No, I'm not
Okay.
the accountant. for
What
this.
about the line item that says depreciation? Doesn't that factor in as well? 1.3 million in depreciation.
Depreciation is not a deductible item for these purposes.
No. Capital asset it is. It's listed in the line item right below the capital assets. 1 million for the land, the building is next, and then there's depreciation.
Do you have a question?
Did you not factor, you trying to tell us that this is worth 5.7 million? What about the 1.3 million in depreciation?
What about it?
Doesn't that come off that total in the books?
Yeah, well,
For book
certainly-
value?
Certainly it does.
Okay.
On page 19, if you care to look there,
You know what, gentlemen, I think I've said it about the weight of this evidence.
If you say we're not putting weight on it, I'm fine with that. I'll move on.
I said we'll put the appropriate weight on it.
Well, okay, 0, but, what is the methodology evaluation commonly known as that the assessment department's using? Is this fair to call it the Rushmore method?
yes,
Okay. And you're familiar with this method then?
yes,
And in the general principle, would you agree with me that it's to remove the business value from the real estate value?
yes.
And have you received training in the Rushmore method in the assessment department, you yourself?
Yes,
And perform valuations using this method?
yes, all our evaluations are using this method.
Okay. Going to your statement, I had a couple of questions on the statement. Firstly, the food item, line item, which you've stabilized at 338,000. You did mention that you have a statement from post reference here. Is there food listed on that line? And this isn't a market question. This is a physical condition question.
I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman.
You don't have to give me the number.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Yeah, that's fine. Is there a number listed for food on the one that you have? And if you don't want to answer it, that's fine. I'll move on.
I don't see the relevance.
Is it on the mailer?
We're talking the 2018 mailer?
Well, because we have new owners. So just move on with your questioning.
The first red, 202,000, I take it that this was a mathematical calculation, taking the room revenue to subtract the room costs?
Right, it's the process of stabilizing the actuals to what we're using for the value.
Well, I'm looking at the statement provided here, and they said a room total is 673,000 less 357,000 in expenses, plus there were some other expenses elsewhere. So I take it your calculation led to 202,000 from based on those?
We stabilized at 30% of the room rent.
Okay. So you took 673,000, 30%, and the expenses are assumed to be the rest. Is that what you're saying?
That's how it was.
Okay. The vendor cost, the cost line, 2 previous years are listed here, and you have 1,564,000. How was that number arrived at?
1,564,000.
Yes.
Generally, we see vendor costs at 85%, and that's how this was done.
At 85%.
Of the vendor revenue?
So that was done at 85% of the revenue.
Yes.
Now, you've listed on the 2016 mailer 1,182,363. Now, would that be the mailer that's on your page 21 to 24?
Yeah, I think the initial valuation on this was done using the mailer, and in preparation for this hearing, I had a closer look at the very, very detailed financial statements, and there are some discrepancies between the mailer and the financial statements. So that's why it's important for us to stabilize the numbers if they don't make a lot of sense, and we look at industry norms in doing so, and that's what we've done in this case.
Did not the owner report those vendor costs at $1,706,000?
As I said, the numbers on the mailer differ from the financial statements. For example, the owner.
Are the financial statements in the record?
They're not in my brief here, but I have looked at them.
Okay.
So the owner took the number of purchases and listed that as the cost of sales, when the proper methodology would be to take the beginning inventory plus the purchases minus the ending inventory, and that is the true cost of sales. So there are discrepancies with some of the other line items as well. One thing that is for certain is we've taken the net income on the statement and added back the non-deductibles. So we reconciled the statement provided to us to come up with the $372,826.
Okay, well, let's get back to the question. You have put in $1,564,000 for vendor cost, and vendor sales, you're using the actual vendor sales at $1,840,000 roughly. And you're saying that the markup would indicate in your 85% is the markup?
85% is the cost.
Is the cost, I mean, yes.
85 and 4 or 5% for wages is very typical.
Okay, and where's this 85% number come from?
Just analyzing all the returns that come to us, we see vendor costs are consistently in that area with slight variation.
So what you're saying is that the markup on beer is 15%.
Well, less the 5% or 4% for wages, so it's
No, just the
in
mark,
the neighborhood of
yeah.
10%,
the gross profit on
10
it.
to 11%.
Well, you've got 15%.
Well, if you take the vendor wages off, we have 11%.
Well, the vendor wages are a separate item. We're talking about vendor cost of the beer. You're saying that there's a 15% markup, or 50, it's not a markup, I'm sorry, it's a higher markup.
That would be the margin.
A 15% margin.
Yes,
So if you sold beer for $1, you're making 15 cents.
that's
Okay. Now, same question on the wages. You put in 73,000, and I note that on page 23, that number is actually about 95,000.
As I said, there was some discrepancies between the mailer and the financial statements. So I took the time to go through the financial statements and drill down on the wages and benefits for each area. And that's a more accurate picture. However, at the end of the day, we stabilized based on numbers that make sense in terms of what we see with other similar.
But on page 23, the mailer that they are required to submit says $95,000 for costs. This is the mailer upon which that if they don't submit, a penalty will be inflicted on someone. So you're saying you're not using this mailer then?
Where are you looking? Well,
Page 23.
We did use the mailer for breakdowns for ease of entering the data, and we assumed initially that those numbers would of course be accurate, but we want to talk about actual, you're concerned about the vendor wages, are you?
I'm only looking at the evidence that has been presented to us. If you have more, it should have been presented, or if the board cares to grant us an adjournment so you can share those with us, we'll look at them.
Certainly willing to look at all the information to make sure that we have an accurate assessment.
But the evidence you've brought this board on page 23 indicates that you have a shortfall of approximately $160,000 of expenses that the owner has claimed that you're not putting on your page 3. Is that correct?
I wouldn't agree.
Well, okay, let me give you the right number. Page 23, they have indicated $1,801,000 roughly in cost of sales and employee costs. And on page 3, you're allocating $1,637,000. So that's roughly 160. Sorry, I lost my math there. $160,000 in expenses that differ from what they've claimed. Correct?
No, I don't agree.
You don't agree with the math?
I don't agree, no.
How could you not agree with the math? It's your evidence.
Well,
You submitted it. It's your numbers.
yes, I did.
Okay, do you disagree that it's printed on page 23?
No, this is the actual mailer submitted to us.
And you don't disagree what you've printed on page 3?
I don't disagree with any of it. It's my evidence.
Okay, but the math, now you're disagreeing with the math or not?
No,
Okay, what are you disagreeing with then?
nothing. I'm not disagreeing. I have a stabilized workup for the value here, and I stand by the evidence.
Okay, and that is based on a 15-point spread for the gross profit, which is the difference between what the beer costs them compared to what they're selling it for.
Correct.
Now, do you know the markup on beer? How is that relevant?
It's 15%.
Do you know that? Is that okay? And
I
that's
see it over and over and over in the submissions that we get from.
that's what I was going to ask. That's your
Yes,
basis
that's
for it.
what we see.
Okay, all right. Actually, those are my questions.
Thank you. Carrie, any questions? Richard?
None, thanks.
I just have one. What page was the cap rate chart on again?
The cap rate is on page 5.
Yes, I've got it. So what type of hotel? It's a beverage hotel, but
It's
it,
a beverage hotel, and beverage hotels, we use 12% across the board, so it's not in that.
so it's not part of this table because these range much lower.
Correct. These would be for full service or limited service hotels. Which this is not.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question. Okay, Rocky, you may proceed.
I've emailed rebuttal information earlier today, and I don't know if you've got it in your system yet. It's
No, we don't.
2 documents, 2 PDF documents.
And we have it now. Rocky, we have it now.
Okay, thank you. So the larger document, I'm imagining we don't have to spend a great deal of time on it, is an excerpt from a document from the Appraisal Institute. This is the United States Appraisal Institute. It's called Hotels and Motels, and it's just some information on the Rushmore method. Now, when the board wants to deliberate on the weight evaluation, there's a couple of things in there. And again, I'm going to give this 20 seconds because that's probably the weight it needs.
So that's actually in our
Yes, it's
display document number 2.
It's the large document. The large document firstly shows some calculations, but the second page is the beginning of
The large document, which is 62 pages.
yes. Now, the second page, I said, I'm not going to give it any weight because I'm assuming you're not going to give any weight to what we heard about the concept of capital. But this is a text that's distributed by the Appraisal Institute, and anyone who's valuing hotels must be fully aware of. And the first paragraph is really quite clear. Does it sound reasonable that the real property component for a hotel accounts for only 36% of its property value? This is the beginning of a legal debate. One side said 36, the other side said 60%. The thing is, they both agree. All the pages there, it's a very interesting debate on the methods of removing the business value from a hotel value or book value. So that's when I saw that, I prepared this, and if the board is putting limited weight on that, I'll leave it just reading you that, showing you that first paragraph. Now, the second document is the smaller document. I don't know if you've got yours sized.
Well, we have
The 62 page, it looks like this.
Yeah.
This is the MLCC price list. This is the total price to the vendor, price to the public. You can go through here and select your favorite beverage and see how much they make on it. The popular ones are at 5.5%. That's the markup. Not 15%, 5.5%. Then there are some specialty products, microbreweries that give slightly better rates on. But this is every product that you can purchase. Now, pick any one of them at random. I just went to...
Just to stop you there. This is post-reference. Dated September 1st.
It's not post-reference. What this is, these rates are set by Public Utilities Board. And it hasn't changed. They've only allowed increases. They haven't changed the spread.
But I can read the second line at the top.
Correct.
September 1st, 2020.
That's correct. That's when the revised price list came out, but the prices and policy standard hasn't changed. Public Utilities Board will control the price to public, but they won't change the spread. And there hasn't been a spread change.
Okay.
The point is, the markup is not 15%. There are some items, some specialty items. As I said, local microbreweries have a better rate. Some of the coolers have a better rate, but the beer rate, you can look at the first one on the page, is a 96-cent markup on $23 to the vendor. That's around 5%. Oh, sorry, that's 4%. So this is in rebuttal to the assessor's contention that the markup, that there's a 15-point gross profit on the sale of beer. It's not. It's about 5 to 10, depending on the product.
Okay.
So the calculation for the actual that was put in on their page 23 at 1,706,000 versus 1,839 is about 70%, 7% in that ballpark. which is right on with the price list. So there's nothing needed in adjusting there. That's a gross error. That's a mistake making in trying to reconcile. What we're going to do, as I mentioned the point of preparing our brief was we didn't have statements. The current owner had a post-reference one, and he managed to dig up a statement that was a blend of pre and post-reference. And remember I asked the assessor a question. I said, you're confirming that the mailer, that my numbers here don't match the one that was submitted in 18. And that is correct, because this one was an estimate that he put together so that we could submit to the board what our version of the income was. It was, we don't know if the 17, if this would represent our opinion of the 17. We don't know if it went in or not. I have no knowledge whatsoever, but this is a recreation. Now, rather than rely on it and get into a big dispute about penalties and whether it's admissible or not, we're going to rely on the assessor's data subject to corrections. And the second major correction was the line item referring to you on my page 5. You'll note that line item 702 is blank. And line 714, which is the food expense, is only $16,000. What the statements will show is that the food service facility was rented to a third party. They didn't have food income. And the other comparison is to take a look at the other income, which we have at 63,000 as compared to previous years, which is at 10,000. So in that other income is the rental rate on the for the food service operator. So you'll note that there's that 16,000 in the food, just in case you're curious, is the lobby. There's a snack stand for soft drinks, potato chips, that sort of thing. Markup on those is pathetic, but that's where the costing is. That's what the 16,000 represents. So there is no income. So what this means is a shortfall on the statement of my calculation is approximately $120,000 of income, and that would be cost of sales less the cost of food less the labor. And we only presented it as an estimate, and our estimate of that loss of income, or that it wasn't declared, is on my revised sheet, which was on my rebuttal information. Now, what I also noted is on our workup is, and this is totally our fault, is that the person who did this didn't do the math calculations correct for where the management fee and the FF&E go, and putting the VLT income below line, that sort of thing. So the recalculation of that is in my first column, where it's revised for the math errors. This is the Rushmore method applied to the income that we put back together. Well, the owner called it the Frankenstein method because he had some statements and parts of other statements. So the reliability accuracy is limited. It wouldn't be 100% accurate. It's going to be 85, 90% accurate because the categorization isn't all done properly. In future years, it'll be far more accurate because this owner will be using actual software for tracking versus what we were looking at in previous years. On the basis of not having that income, we had the value of 1.2 million, but what we're intending to looking at today is to focus on the error made on the vendor, and that's on my last column. Now, what we did is we corrected 5 errors in the assessor's report and having to do with the proper application of the Rushmore method. And you'll note that 3 of our corrections resulted in higher values. You'll note that the assessor allowed three categories under admin, A and G for 142,000. That represents approximately 420,000 and 426,000. And our calculation of those using the actuals was a little bit less than that. We're at, well, actually, sorry, ours is a little bit higher. And what we were doing is just relying on nothing but that the evidence that was supplied to the board, which is why this is rebuttal. Going back to the sheet, once I saw the error on the vendor cost, I realizing that I think we have to go back to the document to show what the owner has reported. But the biggest gross error here is the vendor. This is entirely incorrect. And the number should be for cost of sales 1706937 rather than what was submitted at 1564. And that's what we're requesting that the board alter and change for this assessed value. We calculated at 1,914,593 rounded to 1,915,000. That's my presentation.
Thank you. David, any questions?
Yes, the mailer information submitted in your brief. Who filled out this form?
Guy Smith.
Cal
Smith.
Cal Smith?
Yes.
So he's the new owner?
He's one of the partners.
So he's filling out 2018 information from a time before he even owned this property?
He had access to a previous year's statement and for post, I said it was, or explained already, had post-period statements and past reference date statements. So I asked him to put together a pro forma. So as a pro forma, it would have limited reliability.
So when you or Colliers or the new owner submitted the most recent information in June of 2020, they stated in there, we do not have a 12-month statement as we have purchased the property on May the 1st and have a fiscal year ended September 30th. Most recent internal statements have been provided October 1st to May 31st for the preparation of this informational package. So they say in 2020 that they didn't have any information. And yet you say in 2019 that they did. So
They didn't have their own prepared statements. They had old statements, which is somebody else's evidence.
So,
which I explained why we're not putting the greatest reliability on it, because somebody else prepared it. We can't swear to it that it's our work.
So, and again, I got to this a bit earlier. What is the reason for the discrepancies between what was actually submitted to us and what you have here in your evidence?
They're different periods.
Pardon me? What period is this, may I ask?
That's their blank. We couldn't find a blank. So
well, what period does this represent?
It represents 2000. The one in our evidence was for 2018 estimate for the year end. The one that was sent in was the fiscal year for 2018, which is not the April year end.
Okay, I'd like to submit this as rebuttal evidence just to demonstrate to.
Sorry, what are you submitting? The next mailer?
The 2018 mailer.
Yeah, this is the one I asked you for earlier that you didn't want to provide, right?
I don't recall you asking me for a mailer.
Well, no, I asked you to read from it. You wouldn't do it.
I'm submitting this as a rebuttal evidence to show the board, Mr. Chairman, that the numbers are different.
And we're not disputing. Of course they're different. They're different periods.
No, they're the same period.
No, they're not the same period. We had one blank. Cal and I
just
did
asked
it
you
over
what
this.
is represented.
Okay,
I said the 2018.
Okay.
There was a fiscal year.
This
Time
is-
out.
this is 20.
time out.
Can I submit this to rebuttal?
You can submit it, but we'll place the appropriate weight on it. So this again is post-reference.
Well, it matches the same period of time submitted in Mr. Newfeld's brief, but it is to demonstrate that the numbers are different, therefore inconsistent information, which is further credence to the thought that we should place some reliance on it.
And is that the end of your questioning?
Well, I'll continue on if I may. Mr. Newfeld, you continue to say the vendor cost is incorrect.
And we've heard that. You don't need to repeat it.
Just want to make clear that based on the financial statements, the vendor cost is actually $1,529,000, not $1,702,000.
Sorry, which document are you referring to?
I'm giving verbal testimony.
Which document?
Based on the financial statements.
These are the financial statements which you haven't submitted.
Correct. But I reviewed in the process of preparing for this hearing to verify the numbers.
Well, I'm going to object to that because financial statements are a vital part of this debate. And if they were pertinent for a major change like we're showing here, they should have been submitted as evidence.
Well, we can choose to submit or not submit any amount of evidence, and I submitted the main information that we used for the most part in system information. And I show our stabilized work on page 3. I'll leave the questioning there. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. Where are we in questioning? Is it us now? Richard, any questions?
I do, gather my thoughts here. In terms of the document, this will be directed to Mr. Benner. That you submitted, and I understand correctly, your point is to reflect that the document you submitted has different numbers and different areas completed than the document Mr. Neufeld submitted as part of his brief.
That's correct.
And you haven't gone into the detail, but you simply indicated there are two documents.
Yes.
Different
Covering the
numbers.
same period.
Yes, they appear to by the information at the top of the document. Okay, that's my question.
Carrie?
Just not completely clear on that. Mr. Neufeld, so there is no food being served in this building? They have no.
No, there's
You
food
said-
being
You
served.
said it's a third party.
It's, yeah, the space is rented to a third party. They earn the money and pay rent.
And that is still occurring now.
Right now, I think that contract expired because with COVID, they just shut down. And the startup, they are, I think they're hoping to take they lost their operators, so they're going to take it back over themselves.
Okay. And this was typical bar food served in the bar?
Yeah, I didn't look at the menu, but I was in there yesterday, and it has a reasonable sized kitchen.
Okay, just.
Yeah.
Because I think in the city's document, it basically says that there is no restaurant in there.
Oh, no, it's served in the bar. Yeah, it's the kitchen that's attached. It's like a lot of hotels will move that way if they can find a third service operator, and it takes that a risky, or it makes it less risky for them. You know, employees they don't have to deal with.
Okay, thank you. That's all we can.
Thank you. I just have one question. If it's being rented out to a third party, where does that revenue appear on the statement?
I mentioned earlier line 707.
No, on your rebuttal brief. You've got,
On other 63,165.
okay.
So that includes the ATM revenue and the confectionery income from the front desk and the rent received on the restaurant. And I don't have the number. If you're going to ask me that next, it is.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I had.
I have a follow-up question on the rebuttal material.
Okay.
Looking at this statement, second page shows that vendor sales are 1,779,000. Is that correct? Line 705?
1,779,101.
One, yes. And on the next page, the cost of sales is 1,657,000.
Yeah.
So what is that gross profit?
Oh, it looks like they lost money here.
Well, I'm just talking about the cost of sales, the gross profit it's called, the cost of the product versus the cost of the sales.
Well, if I may, Mr. Neufeld, you say that there's no food revenue and the rent is in the ATM. The ATM is the ATM commissions. That's what that is. They never stopped selling food. They never rented it out. We don't have any rental information. There's no financial statements to go with this to verify any of this. And I have my doubts whether Cal Smith actually took this out. Or this was
I don't think that's appropriate. You don't
I'll
know
leave it
for
there.
sure. Anything else?
Sorry, I was just I was asking a question and I didn't get the response. Does that not indicate that rather than 85%, that the number is 93.2%?
doesn't indicate that.
Well, that's what the numbers show, don't they?
I don't believe these numbers. So based on what we see in returns over and over and over, 85% is the margin.
Okay, well,
That's
we
what
have
I'll go with.
We have two different operators running the same hotel who've given you numbers. You don't believe either of them. Is that correct?
I think you've made your point. Anything else?
I just wanted to hear it again.
Oh, can I ask a redirect, Mr. Chairman?
Gentlemen, this has now been an hour and a half. It has to come to a conclusion.
Okay, let's leave it there.
We have all the evidence. I think I've said it a couple of times. We'll place the appropriate weight on the evidence submitted and the testimony. So that concludes this property.
I just, a brief summation,
Fine.
and I'll wait and see if the assessor has anything to say first.
Let's not rehash everything we heard.
Don't worry about it. It's gonna be brief.
Okay, then I'll do a short summation. We're left to deal with mostly 2016 information in the valuation of this hotel. Unfortunately, we don't have 2017 information. The information that has come subsequent to that is, of course, post-reference and can't be relied upon. We know the old owner sold to the new owner. We know what the new owner paid for it based on the financials that have been presented here. And I can say that based on the old owner's balance sheet, it would be my opinion that they wouldn't sell their property for less than the outstanding mortgage. That's just common sense. Why would they? Their opinion of value is shown in the balance sheet, and I'm guided by that. And I'm comfortable in saying that 3.2 million is a conservative valuation. And I would ask for
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld.
Well, everyone's a liar. I'm a liar. The owners are a liar. And I'm not trying to be dramatic here. I just don't really care for that sort of characterization. They've submitted their information.
You're entitled to give your summation.
This is my summation. They submitted their information in good faith. And my client didn't have any of the information that was in the reference here that was reliable. So as a result, we can actually forget about half the nonsense, the 3/4 of the nonsense here. We're only talking about the assessor's mistake. That's it, the beer vendor mistake. And in both pieces of evidence that he introduced on the subject property, it showed a markup of, a gross profit or a cost of product between 92.8% on one and 93.2% on the other. Yet he's put it at 85%, thereby pushing the value, decreasing the expenses, increasing the profit. That is incorrect. the evidence fails to hold it, and I believe the number we have would be fair. Our corrected number after correcting his mistake, 1,915,000. Sorry for all the fireworks today.
I have one question of you, and then
Okay.
this is over.
Okay.
Do the new owners have any experience in running a hotel?
Yes, they do. They own the sons of the owners of the Norvilla and the Marion.
Thank you very much. That concludes this hearing. And we should take a break. Sorry, Brad. Thank you. I'll bring the meeting back to order, and the next item on the docket is 310 Donald Street. And David, you may proceed. Oh.
Oh, man. Can you state your full name, please?
Bradford Scott Forrester.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, this is file number 20-494. The roll number is 13-0990-68865, 310 O'Donnell Street. The owner is HAC General Partner, Inc. The details of the hotel are listed on the front page. The value in the roll for 2021 is $10,277,000. Mr. Chairman, we are prepared to recommend a lower value, that being $9,198,000.
Thank you. Mr. Borgstrom, are you aware of this recommendation?
I am, and it's a step in the right direction, but we're seeking a significantly lower value than that. So,
Okay, and David, please
Thank you, Mr.
proceed.
Chairman. Page 2 shows our request for information was complied with. This property sold for $2.5 million back in 2013. I believe this represented air rights as this hotel starts on the 11th floor and goes upward. Income approach summary appears on page 11 to 12 of this report. Cap rate table is shown on page 3. MAA excerpts on page 4 and 5. The pictures, including an aerial photo of the hotel. It is the Alt Hotel directly across from the MPS Center. Overheads on page 6. Some other pictures of the premise. The meeting room configurations are shown here, as well as some bedroom. 2 beds, 1 bed, 1 bed corner room. Pictures, different room configurations. There is a fitness facility on site. The lounge area shown on page 10. Getting to page 11, this is the original valuation of this property. We took the 2017 information, stabilized to come up with the value, taking an NOI of $1,088,11 at a 9 cap to come up with the value of $10,277,000. It should be noted this hotel began operations in 2015. 2016 and 2017 are the first 2 full years of operations. So in our opinion, this hotel is still in the ramp-up phase, and we would expect, particularly occupancy, which was at 36%, fairly low. We would expect that to continue to ramp up going forward. Page 12 is the breakdown of A&G and the reconciliation from the net from the statement and adding back items that are deductible, which is mortgage interest and depreciation. Pages 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. These are the detailed financial statements, and I think these were submitted to us at the BA hearing on this property. They were a little more detailed than the original ones itself. And this was part of the reason for my recommendation. Turning to page 18, this is a snapshot of the balance sheet from this operator for the year 2017. You can see that they have a valuation of land at $4 million and building at $24,377,000. Again, these aren't numbers that we're relying on for our valuation. We obviously do an income approach. This is the company's own opinion of their the value of their property. Page 19 is goes back to 2016. And they talk about the reconciliation of the carrying amount from fair value to the book value. And they speak on page 20 of the measurement of fair value that management themselves have performed evaluation of the land and building, and they give some details as to how they've done that. And so we can see that they actually made an upward valuation, revaluation in 2017. So they have an opinion that their property is worth more than 20 million, and which makes it a little bit difficult to be trending even further away from that value. However, we are prepared to take into account the ramp-up phase. Occupancy is still struggling to get to where it should be. Page 22 is the title on this property. 22, 23. On page 25, we can see there is a mortgage registered on the property of $20,920,000. Again, it speaks to mortgage value. It will obviously be based on percentage of the asset value, and it gives further credence to our valuation numbers. And turning to page 28 and 29 at the back. Now, this is the basis of our recommendation for reduced value. As I said, based on those more detailed financial statements, we had a closer look at things. And our valuation, the revised valuation is done primarily off of the actual financials, with just two areas that we stabilized: the food and beverage cost, we stabilized to 82% of the revenue, and the marketing expense we stabilized to 4% from a much higher value. So based on those stabilizations and using the rest of the actuals, we come up with a net operating income of $973,909. Using a 9 cap, came up with the recommended value of $9,198,000. We're still standing by that recommended value. We think that's certainly a fair value, especially in light of the company's own opinion and value of their property. And that's my presentation.
Thank you. Brad, any questions?
I do, thank you. I'm going to start on the portion of the assessor's presentation that he wasn't relying on. So let's take a look at the balance sheets. And you indicated in your verbal testimony to the board that you were not relying on the values shown in here.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, on page 19. Thank you. And so just to provide a little more detail for the board, let's take a look at page 21. And you'll see there, under a continuation of the note 6 fixed assets, you'll see there that the valuation technique that they applied was a discounted cash flow. You see that? That's never applied, and in fact has been rejected by the city, correct?
That's not how we do it.
That's not how you do it. In fact, the approach applied by the city is the direct capitalization, correct? And so this is done on a very different basis in determining this asset value for accounting purposes as opposed to assessment purposes, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, a discounted cash flow has never been accepted by this board or the municipal board in the past, correct? Now, You indicated that the owners were compliant with respect to the income and expense questionnaires that were sent out, correct?
Yes.
And that means, for my clarification, that they responded for the years 2015, 2016, and 2017. And in fact, they continue to be compliant to this date, correct?
As far as I know.
So you also indicated that the information you showed starting on page 13 was a financial statement. Wouldn't it be more accurate to say that this is a profit and loss statement?
Well, I would consider it to be a financial statement.
So
I don't want to get into.
and so the owners, when they responded to the request for information from the city, provided an income and expense questionnaire that was completed, correct? They also provided this profit and loss statement, correct? And then they also corrected the financial statements from which you showed an excerpt with the asset valuation, correct?
Yeah.
So they provided three separate
This
parts.
was the most recent info that we had received. I believe it was provided by one of your colleagues at the EA hearing, and it had very good detail on that.
You indicated that they responded to the 2017 income and expense questionnaire, correct? This was part of that income and expense questionnaire, was it not?
Not this.
Not this. And so you are in here not using the income and expense questionnaire, correct? That was submitted to the department?
I'm not using it.
Did you try, and there are differences in how things are categorized as between the profit and loss statements and the income and expense questionnaires, right? And did you make an effort to try and reconcile the income and expense questionnaire versus the profit and loss statement? There's a reason why you wouldn't do that.
I relied on these as this was the most recent information provided.
So let's take a look at this. So in terms of its location, you'd agree with me that this area, Portage and Main, effectively continues to struggle in terms of the local homeless population, drug use, crime.
I can't really comment on the social ills of downtown.
Is that something that you would have considered in this valuation? So if we take a look at your page, and bear with me when I get to the right page, 28, which is your revised valuation. The original, let me start in another place. Is it fair to say that in terms of the revenues that you've stabilized here, they reflect the actual 2017 as reported?
Yes.
But you've made some adjustments to the expense side, correct?
Yes.
Now, in the workup on which the original assessment was based on, page 11 has a number of these line items highlighted in red, but we haven't done that on your page 28, correct? And so can you identify which line items you've adjusted from actual in terms of the expenses?
Sure. Food and beverage cost.
Yes.
And marketing.
And marketing. And the basis for the adjustment in your marketing?
Well, the marketing is very high, probably reflecting the startup nature of the hotel. Longer term, probably revert to a more average marketing, which we see typically at 4%.
But you accepted the income based on a 36.62% occupancy rate. Yeah. At that rate, wouldn't prudent ownership require additional expenditures for marketing?
Absolutely.
Now, marketing, in terms of the profit and loss statements, actually includes a number of other line items. You're not sure. Well, you prepared this off the profit and loss statements, right?
Yes.
Okay, so can you show us in the profit and loss statement the marketing expenses?
Well, I'm going to suggest that they total 409,843.
Right, and in the profit and loss statement, can you show me what page that is?
Is it really necessary to do that?
Because we're going to be asking you some more questions about it.
I don't really want to take up too much time of the board here for these types of things. Okay, here we go. Sales and marketing expenses, page 15.
Right.
The total being 409,842.
Okay, and of this 409,843, what did you remove to arrive at your $190,000?
Nothing specifically. We just used 4%.
4%. Okay. Now, I want to draw your particular attention to shared expenses. And I'm not bilingual, but if we look at, and my pronunciation is going to be atrocious, but if we look at the column current cumulative, that's the current year, right? 2017. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
And if we look at the very right-hand column, that's the previous year or 2016, correct? And those would be the 2016 and 2017 actuals for the profit and loss, correct? Okay. So if we look at the row towards the bottom of the sales and marketing expenses, it shows shared expenses. Did you make investigation or ascertain what that is? And you've already indicated that you did not cross-reference this against the income and expense questionnaires, correct? Now, in 2016, isn't it true that the owners also included a copy of the franchise agreement?
I don't know.
You didn't look at that? And you made no investigation either with myself or the owners as to what that shared expense might be comprised of?
I did not.
Would it be appropriate to allow a franchise fee on this property?
Well, if there is a franchise fee, then yes.
Now, in terms of the adjustments that you've made, you indicated that the only two items you adjusted were the food and beverage costs and the marketing, correct? Okay. Now, on your next page, page 29, and I'm just looking for clarification here, you show a 2017 expense of $197,393.
Yes.
And you prepared the information on this page, right?
Yes.
So would it be fair to say that that comes from page 16 at the top under IT and communications?
Yes.
And so it's not just internet, it's a number of line items that would be incorporated into that expense, correct? And so if we look over again in the very right-hand column, and we've already, I think, agreed that that reflects the 2016 actual profit and loss. You'll see there that the figure is $195,724. Why doesn't it appear on page 29 under 2016? Is that something that might have affected your stabilization?
No.
Because you're dealing solely with 2017.
Correct.
And so having accepted the occupancy rate as low as it is, your view was that the owners should spend less on marketing, right?
No, that's not my opinion. We already talked about that.
Well, I'm just looking at your figure of 100 and,
You asked me the question, Mr. Borgstrom, and I said they would have to spend more.
but you've stabilized at 190,000.
Yes, a more normalized expenditure.
Okay. I believe those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary?
Just one question. Mr. Mayor, you talked about the startup phase in regards to hotels. Does the city have a rule that follows for the length of time it's allotted to a hotel?
There's no rules, but what we see is generally 2 to 5 years to ramp up to where you would expect.
Okay, so, sorry, so 2 to 5 years, that's a big span. Is there, so do you look at the occupancy of the rooms? Is that what sort of indicates
Sure.
if it's low?
That would be a big indicator. We would expect a hotel right in the shed district and right across from MTS to be much more than 36%. So we can see that it's still ramping up. It's difficult for us to make those types of projections. So in this case, we accepted the actual 17, just made 2 adjustments.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Richard?
I do have one question arising from the member's question. In terms of projecting a different income than is actually realized in terms of projecting expenses, that is something that would encompass additional risk, correct?
Yes.
And so you would then necessarily have to amend the cap rate to a higher rate to reflect that additional risk, right?
Sometimes it's done that way. Other times it's done with more conservative assumptions.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I have no questions.
Okay,
So, Brad, you can proceed.
okay, I'm going to go through my information fairly quickly. I do have, this is not new information. Oh, sorry. This is not new information. This is just a summary page showing our stabilized income and the city's stabilized income from the revised recommendation and the difference. And I'm happy to hand that out now or when I'm done. It
Well,
may be of assistance to the board.
Do you have any
I
objection?
have no objection.
Yeah.
Okay, we might as well take it then.
And I'll get to this in a moment, but first I want to go through our particular figures. Now, I'm going to start because I did actually have the opportunity to look at not only the opportunity, but I actually availed myself of that opportunity of looking at all of the information that was submitted. The income and expense questionnaires, the profit and loss statements. There is, in fact, a franchise agreement in place on this hotel. And if we take a look as one example on on page 10, that's under the other expenses. You'll see there under the other expenses, the city doesn't allow anything for that. That's actually the franchise fee. And so we've actually removed that from the combined profit and loss numbers. And we show that separately under franchise, which the city has not. You'll see there the franchise fee that was reported was actually, if we look at our pages, 139,863 as of December 31st of 2000 and the end of 2017, sorry. So I took a look at the INEs, I took a look at the profit and loss statements, And we have stabilized in a manner different than the city. You'll see there that the difference in our income is $2, and I'll attribute that to round off error. All of our income and expenses are summarized for 3 years on page 8. I will tell you that I did not include 2015 for the reasons that the assessor has already described. This property, and you'll see there in the notes, the reasons for the different adjustments, but the hotel itself opened officially April 30th of 2015. So what we're looking at here is really just an 8-month statement for 2015. So I did not use that in the information that we've set out here. I did look at it. Ultimately, I gave it effectively no weight, but I did look quite closely at 16 and 17. The ramp-up period is correct, but you'll see that we are not disagreeing with the city's cap rate. And so by stabilizing the income and expenses in the fashion we did, should reflect the actual operating experience. Or if we're going to project something different, then we're going to need to use a significantly higher cap rate in this case. So again, our stabilized income totals, the total sales, and there are no VLTs in this property. There's a $2 difference, and that's nothing that we really worry about. The $425,000. Sorry. $425,000 expense allocation that the city has used here includes a number of categories, including wages and beverage. It's not just food. So we've actually broken it out. This property actually shows a parking income, which we've also applied. There is no parking associated with the ownership of this hotel. They have a use agreement with the Centerpoint Development to use their parkade, and you can see there that they take a small profit from that. For the purposes of this hearing, we've included both the parking income and the parking expense that they pay out. So ultimately, they're about $9,000 to the good. It's not going to make a huge difference ultimately, and I'm still reflecting on the appropriateness of actually including parking income when there is none with the hotel. So we took a look at the admin and general expenses. Bear with me. And you can see there that the assessor has a total when you look at the A&G management wages and the A&G wages and benefits. There is a total there from the city of 655. We're only applying 371. We've applied the actuals, so the advertising, marketing, and promotions at 269,980. The heat, light, and power is the same as the city. We've actually utilized an average of 16 and 17 for repair and maintenance. Now, typically we tend to use average rates. In this particular case, you would expect that to go up over time as the property ages. For the purposes this early in its life, an average of 2 full years of operating was reasonable, and so we actually are using an expense lower than the city. Again, the city was provided with a full copy of the franchise agreement, and so we are deducting that franchise fee, which is standard practice. The line, and we'll take a look at the handout because it's bigger font. When you took a look at the line numbers 27 and line numbers 29, 27 while it's termed management fee, it's actually the mechanism by which the business value is removed. That's the Rushmore method. Do I need to speak up a little bit?
Yes, I
Okay,
can't
I
quite hear you.
apologize. So that the methodology is to remove 4% of this hotel, 4% of your total revenues. And so that's why the city's calculations and ours are exactly the same here. Similarly, with the reserve, that's again from the Rushmore method. Again, we come up with the same figure because that's based on, for this hotel, 3% of the total income. Again, no VLTs. The insurance, business tax, and property tax are as set out by the city as well, so there's no disagreement there. But ultimately, when you look in the very right-hand column, you'll see there that the difference between our stabilized and the city stabilized is almost $201,000. Now, about $140,000 of that is the franchise fee that was omitted, and I'll accept that it was inadvertent. But which leaves us with an adjustment made by the assessor of about $60,000, not recognizing real expenses. I'm going to suggest that that comes in the form of the marketing, which if you're running at a 36% occupancy rate is not the line item that you would reduce. So again, we remove, as the city does, the personal property allowance in the amount of 15%. We agree with the utilization of the 9% cap rate based on the income and expenses in place as we've stabilized. And so we are looking for a reduction rounded down to $7.3 million. Now, the assessor made reference, I can't remember if it was this one or another one, where the owner wouldn't sell it for what we're suggesting, but that's only half of the formula. The act requires that it be a willing seller and a willing buyer. And I suggest that there's no buyer out there based on this income that would pay more than that at this time. Now, there are a couple of court cases that I could refer to, and one of them is Broadway Square, which, aside from other things, basically say that the assessment system, the legislation is what we have. We have to assess it as it currently exists. So based on all of that, that's a big paraphrase, based on all of that, our request is a reduction down to $7.3 million.
Thank you. David? No questions? Gary?
Just in regards to the franchise agreement, is it a percentage, I'm assuming?
Pardon me?
I'm assuming it's based on a percentage.
Yeah, I didn't go through the minutia, but I do have a copy here. My apologies. So attached to the 2016 income and expense questionnaire, and I didn't include it in our evidence. But there, I mean, that's the first page, and it talks about the management agreement, and it goes into the franchise fee in there. So that's why we've extracted it out. Sorry, showing it separately.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So is this franchise fee is it the same every single year?
No, it's a portion of the earnings, as I understand it.
And is the hotel expected perform at a particular level?
Well, I think that their projections, I don't have privy, or I'm not privy to their business plan or their projections, but I think that any prudent owner would anticipate increasing performance over time.
Okay.
Now, that hasn't been the case here, and I can't talk about post-reference. I won't. But again, if we were to impute better figures here, there would be a risk associated with that, and so we would need to apply a much higher cap rate.
Okay. Sorry, and you probably mentioned this, but I missed it. Line 28, the 196,558 other.
Yep. So when you, so I'll take you to the page in our brief for the INE. And we look on page 10. That's 197,392 is the other expenses. And so when you look at our page 8, what I've actually done is taken an average of 2016 and 17. And so that's where the 196 comes from. Okay. So if you look under the same line under income and expenses, or on the INE for 2016, you'll see the 195,724.
Thank you. Can I direct to Mr. Bennett?
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, is this hotel considered, well, first of all, does the city categorize hotels into, luxury, standard, mom and pop, that we do?
Yes.
Okay. And this would be considered,
Probably a focused service, select service hotel.
select service?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that like a higher rating in terms of the,
Not necessarily higher. Focused and select service hotels are kind of a hybrid full service, but they don't offer the full range of services, so they're not full service. But they're often just as profitable, so there's not that much difference.
I can just add on to that for one quick thing. They refer to this as a boutique hotel. Okay, and so in terms of rates, and I know that the assessor showed it on in his information, the rack rate is $149 a night. That's a lot lower than you're going to find at the Fairmont or any of the other hotels, or the Fort Garry for that matter. I know that we have a corporate account at the Fairmont, and even our corporate rate is significantly in excess of that. So they're different.
and this is more curiosity, but does the city department, assessment department, do you consider or have information, new hotels that are going to be built in the shed area? Do you ever sort of, when you're assessing something like another hotel, do you ever sort of give consideration that something is in the process of being built and it could have an adverse effect?
Well, we look at everything that's happening in the market. We probably look more at recent room additions as opposed to what's in the pipeline. Sometimes things are in the pipeline, don't get it out for many years. But we would look and see, oh, there's 600 new rooms just added in. But those rooms are generally being added as a result of increased demand. So they're look at supply and look at demand as well. They're not getting built on spec. They're getting built in response to demand. With the convention center, COVID aside, it's expected to generate a need for more hotel rooms to accommodate large conventions. So there's another project underway, but it's been underway for some time now.
Yes. Thank you. That's all
Thank
my
you.
questions.
Richard?
No, good, thank you.
And I have no questions. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That concludes this issue.
I'm not gonna say I gave an assurance, but I told Mr. Newman that I thought I would be done by about 11:30.
You were bang on. Yeah, Dave needs 5 minutes, so if you want to mute that. Thank you. We'll resume the hearing. The next property is 3540 Pembina, and can you affirm, Mr. Newman?
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give in this hearing to be the truth, the whole truth, and
Thank you. David, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is file number 20-195. The roll number is 0309117530, 3540 Pembina Highway. The owner is 6929401 Manitoba Limited. Value in the roll for 2021 is $3,400,000. And we will be asking for confirmation of the realty assessment of $3,400,000. Just as a note, this property was heard for 2020 at the border revision, and it was confirmed. Further to that, that confirmed value has been appealed to the municipal board and hasn't yet been dealt with. So on that basis, we would ask that this panel confirm the value so that it may play out in a higher court, the municipal board of Manitoba, at which case, if there was a reduction, that value would be carried forward to the other two roll years, being 21 and 22. So with that being said, turning to page 2 of my brief, we have the compliance for our request is indicated there. Sale history of the subject property is also listed there. Last selling in 2014 for $2,500,000. My notes there just reaffirm what I already said, that this has been heard and is on appeal for 2020. Page 3 is our income workup. This is the same evidence my colleague presented at the 2020 realty hearing. There have been no changes to the property, and all the evidence is the same as it was there. Essentially, we've used the 2017 actuals and adjusted for management fees and FF&E reserve. So 599,104 is the 17 NOI, and from that we're subtracting management fees of 87,497, FF&E at 58,216 to come up with the NOI of 453,391. To that we applied a cap rate of 12% to determine the value at $3,400,000. Page 4 is the breakdown of E&G expenses and the reconciliation. Page 5 is the cap rate table. MAA excerpts are on 67. Some photos of the subject property appear on page 8. There's an overhead view and a street view also. Some pictures of one of the rooms. Follows. There's a picture of the beer vendor there on page 10. The lounge and VLT area on page 11. And the restaurants, pictures on page 12. And then there's no outdoor patio on this premise shown on page 13. Page 14 lists the amenities of this property, which is known as the St. Norbert Hotel, listed there. Pages 15 through 18 are the mailer submission that we financial for baseball. And at the very last page, we just show that this property was indeed appealed for 2020. And as I say, that value was incorrect and has been appealed further. On that basis, we ask that this value be confirmed at $3,400,000.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Newman?
Yes. Mr. Penner, you were not the assessor who had conduct of the matter for 2020, correct? It was Jason Brown?
Correct.
And similarly, I was not the representative who had conduct of the matter for 2020. It was the Altus Group, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And part of what the department had from Altus's submission for 2020 was the actual financial statements of the hotel operation for 2017, correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they submitted in that hearing.
So did you look back to see what they submitted at that hearing?
No, I did not.
Is it fair to say that your approach to this appeal was to simply note the confirmation by the panel for 2020 and do nothing more? I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but to not investigate it further, is that fair?
Right. No, I just, this is basically the very same evidence as was presented there. So I am prepared to talk about it, but I didn't do any further investigation.
Okay. And do you agree with me that I emailed you on August 11th and invited you to look at this matter so we might have a conversation about whether some adjustments might be made to resolve it?
Yes.
And is it also fair to say your response to me was it's been dealt with and it should simply be confirmed and dealt with at the next level of appeal?
Yes.
Okay. And of course, one of the things that's happened over the last number of months is that what was traditionally a 2-year cycle has now been extended to a 3-year cycle, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I think I have no further questions.
Well, thank you. Richard? Did you inspect this hotel?
I did not.
In your opinion, based on the pictures, what would you say the condition of it is?
Well, we always assume average condition for its age. So, you know, I don't have anything to go on. It's less than average.
So there's been no renovations to it that you're aware of?
Again, I didn't investigate for recent renovations. Normal maintenance, I would suggest.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. You have a read,
Can
Rick?
I read that?
Sure.
Do you have in your notes when it was last inspected?
I'd have to remote in.
I'm sorry.
I would have to remote into my work computer. Did you want to wait or?
How long?
I mean, we get out to these probably every 4 or 5 years, so I would suggest that that's probably the case.
Thank you.
That was it? Okay, thank you. Mr. Newman, you're on.
Thank you. So let me just speak for a brief minute about hotel assessments generally, and you've now had the benefit of hearing a couple of appeals. Uniquely, hotels are the only type of property that are valued based on the income and expense of the business operation. When they value an office building, they don't look at the revenue of the Royal Bank or any of the other tenants. Uniquely, hotels are done in that way. And that's a method that goes back 25 years. And perhaps regrettably, I can say that I was there at ground zero when this was first done in the mid-1990s. What was then the Sheraton Hotel in downtown Winnipeg, which doesn't exist anymore. Because hotels don't rent in the marketplace, so you can't get rents out of the market. And this Rushmore methodology that you've heard a little bit about, that's the methodology that's used. Critical to that methodology is appropriate stabilization and recognition of revenues and expenses. You heard Mr. Borgstrom in the last appeal raise issues about recognition of expenses, but that's a critical component. And the City of Winnipeg publishes a manual. And in my brief, the attachments at page number 10 is the manual the city publishes, and it reflects data. So the city sends questionnaires to all hotels. A significant number of them respond. The city extracts data in relation to the operations of those hotels. And that's all reflected in the manual, which begins at page 10 of the attachments to my brief. And I just give you that by way of a little bit of background. So this appeal gets, this property gets appealed in 2020, not me, not Mr. Penner. And the primary issue raised at that time is that there's a failure to recognize all the expenses. And the request is for a value of $2,790,000. And what you see in my brief on page, the first page of the attachment, which is probably the fourth page of the PDF is a workup where I have shown all the revenue and expenses out of the 2016 and 2017 financial statements. And what follows in the following pages are the actual financial statements. And I want to say to you that I represent a lot of hoteliers. You get a spectrum of quality of financial information. Some of it is pretty good. Some of it is pretty rudimentary. This hotel has good financial statements because what they do is, if you look at page 4 of my attachments, you'll see this is a summary, but they break down the revenues by department: beverage room, vendor, hotel rooms, restaurant, etc. It's all broken down. But then if you turn the pages, page number 5 of my attachments, there is the beverage room operation. Revenues are fully broken down. Cost of sales is broken down. Expenses are broken down. And they do this for every single department in this hotel. These are good financial statements in terms of how the spectrum of what you can see for hotels. And you will see some numbers written on some of these pages. At page 5 again, number 12, that means I put the revenues of $904,000 onto what is line 12. And if you go back to page 1, looking at 2016, you can see the $904,960. I also have a brief rebuttal brief, and I'll ask the secretary to put that into your work site. It was given to you primarily for one reason, because I referenced in my brief the attachment of the 2017 financial statements. When I looked at this yesterday, I realized I omitted to attach them. So they're now provided in the rebuttal brief, but all the numbers in my workup are taken from those financial statements, and those are the same financial statements that were presented by Altus at the 2020 appeal. So the difference between us, we're looking for a value of $2,790,000. So that's a difference of $610,000 compared to the assessor's value of $3,400,000. The primary difference between us, I believe, is in wages and a couple of other smaller items. But at the end of the day, because I also included the assessor's workup at page number 3 of my attachments, and you can see that the assessor's net operating income was $453,391, and my net operating income is $372,050. My net operating income is the actual 2017 performance of the hotel, with the addition only of the management fee, which removes the non-assessable goodwill, and of the replacement reserve. And these are things you don't find in hotel financial statements, but they are part of the Rushmore methodology that you heard about as well. So at the end of the day, what's driving the difference in value is a difference of about $81,000 of net operating income. And it's a combination of things, but what I am telling you is that the 2016 and 2017 numbers that you see come from the financial statements. And again, I say to you, these are good financial statements in terms of how hotels prepare their statements and what you see. When I first got this matter, as I asked of Mr. Penner, I approached him and invited him to please have a look at the financial statements and have a look, and maybe there was the possibility of resolving this matter. So part of the issue is, and again, because he's really asking simply for the prior decision of the board to be confirmed, part of the issue is there are some small differences in terms of some of the revenues and some of the expenses. But for example, if you look at Mr. Penner's workup, and that's found at page 3 of my attachments, just for ease of reference, if you want to look there, you can see that for admin in general, the assessor has used $128,174. You can see at A&G management wages, $106,000. You can see A&G wages and benefits, $123,000. And if you look to Mr. Penner's workup, the second page of it, now you've got to go back to his brief, I apologize, but page 4 of his brief, you can see what goes into the $128,000 of A&G. And if you go back to my submission to you and go to page 9 of the attachments, and I'm sorry for this, you got to look at my rebuttal brief. Yeah. So the last page of my rebuttal brief, there is the administrative and general expenses. And just again, in concept, hotels should allocate expenses that relate specifically to the operation of the department, to that department. And this hotel does that. But expenses that relate to the operation of the hotel more generally should fall into the admin and general expense section. And so what you can see when you look at this, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. The total was $677,456. Our total for A&G is $517,000. Why are there differences? Part of it is the salaries and related benefits, as it's called, which is $245,000. Part of it is there's an item relating to security. If you go back to the beverage department, which is in the rebuttal brief, the page numbered 13 in handwriting at the bottom. Under expenses, you can see an item of security, $55,743. You will not find that item anywhere in the assessor's numbers, so it's missing. And I think that makes up a big part of the difference. Part of what I did to help understand is on the first page of the rebuttal brief, I laid out the wages as reflected in the assessor's brief and as reflected in our submission. And you can see on the first page, the 2 columns, the assessor's wages by department, and nothing for benefits, the appellant's wages by department, and also $53,758 of benefits, which is found in that last page of the rebuttal brief in the admin and general section. That's accounting for about $25,000 of the difference between us. But the rest of it is other items in A&G, and which include, as I pointed out, security. And again, if we were to go back to our main submission, our original brief, and the attachments, page number 2, you can see all of the items that we have put into A&G, which make up our $517,000. And you can see that security is the very last one, the $55,743. So every single one of these items in the 2017 column are taken from the financial statements which are attached to this brief. This hotel has been relatively stable in terms of its performance, both from a revenue and an expense perspective. But what happened here at the end of the day was simply, in my view, some expenses were not allowed for. And this is why I had invited Mr. Penner back in earlier August to please have a look at this and let's take a view as to whether we can resolve this matter. Because as I have said a couple of times, this hotel has very good statements in terms of breaking down the expenses. So I want to be crystal clear that what we have done is we have simply used all of the revenues and all of the expenses that are reflected in the financial statements, which for 2016, 2015 are in the original brief, and 2017 are attached to the rebuttal. But again, as I said, in our workup, which is part of our original brief, the workup on page number 1 of the attachment showing the $2,790,000, those are the numbers, all of them, taken from the 2017 financial statement. And similarly, the numbers on the next page, the A&G of $517,965, those are the numbers all taken from the financial statement. So in our view, a reduction in the assessment is appropriate for this property because we believe simply at the end of the day, the assessor is not properly given effect to the financial statements. And the end result of that is that the assessment is a little bit too high. I'm happy to answer questions.
David?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to be referring to page 1 of your brief, Mr. Newman.
Yes.
Where you have the 2016, 2017 columns, and also referring to page 3 of my brief at the same time.
Yes.
I note in your 2016 column, which I assume are actuals, you show a net operating income of $529,987.
Yes.
So 529,987. On page 3 of my brief, we show a net operating income of $450,757.
Right.
So the difference is roughly $79,000.
Right.
So if we look at 2017, your income is at $527,997 for the actual 2017.
Yes.
And ours is $599,104. Again, a difference of approximately $79,000.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, could the discrepancies just be a matter of timing? I think the financial statements are ending November 30th, and the mailer submission is for a year ending December 31st. Could the discrepancy just be in terms of timing?
No.
Okay.
No. And I say that because having spoken with the owners, I know in preparing the questionnaires, they worked off year-end information. I think the discrepancy is a function of certain of the expenses not having been captured for whatever reason. And the security that I referenced earlier is a good example of that. It's just missing.
So do you agree that the information on the mailer doesn't jive with the income statement?
They are a little bit different, yes.
Thank you, that's all my question.
Thank you. Barry?
Sorry, what type of security?
Security personnel.
Yes.
So again, a number of the hotels, and these are more of the hotels that fall into what I'll call the beverage type of hotel. They need people at the door. They need ID being checked. They need parking lots being patrolled. That's what it is.
That's all my questions.
Richard?
I have none from Mr. Newman, but if you have any direct.
Go ahead.
You were quite emphatic in our previous dockets to indicate that you didn't have faith in the statements that were provided by the applicants.
The
In
mailer,
this case-
the mailer, to be clear,
Sorry?
the mailer?
Yes.
Yes.
In this case, we have a mailer that seems fairly organized and fairly structured. Are you accepting the mailer in this?
In this
instance?
case, yes, we use the mailer and,
Okay. And that's where my question goes.
Yeah.
I want to understand that process just a little bit more than I do, and I may have missed something here. So when you develop your stabilized approach, are your folks pushing numbers into the system and then it brings out the stabilized, or is it simply an average of what's gone on here?
no, the stabilized column would be, how we stabilize it, as
Like an
assessors,
individual
hands-on.
person.
And generally speaking, our starting point is the actual reference year data. And then if that data seems at extreme odds with what's in the market, say A and G at 40% revenue, that's a flag, there's something going on there. Perhaps the owner is taking out equity and charging an office management wage. Okay, so we put in all the data and we compile what we would normally see on a, say on a beverage hotel. We would look at the other beverage hotels and how they're performing.
So is it, can I just characterize that? In a
Yeah.
sense, it seems that the model takes over at some point,
Well, no, it's not a
No?
model at all.
okay?
Every one of them is a hands-on assessment. Although we do compile with staff.
So typically then one would expect a replication of the mailer into your statements.
Well, if we have financial statements and if you'll see on page 4, every one of our workups has the reconciliation of the net income that's showing on the actual financial statements, if we have it, to what we show here after we've input it. So we reconcile so that we can be confident that we're accounting for every single dollar.
And then what happens is if you feel, this is kind of a iffy number based on our industry statistics,
Right.
you would alter the presentation of the stabilized amount.
Yeah, the stabilized is where we would make some changes. For example, sometimes taxes aren't stated according to what they actually were for that year. So we can check the actual tax statement. You'll see on page 3, used actual taxes for 17. Those numbers don't always match up with what's reported. So we'll use the actual taxes as per the statement, verify.
Is there a lot of subjectivity in that process based on the experience, the knowledge base of the assessor?
Not on that. No, taxes are taxes. We'll look at what the
Sure.
actual are.
Let me back up. In terms of the the ratios that you would be applying,
Right.
is that a fairly subjective or objective process based on age, experience of?
Yeah, again,
certain
all,
experience?
our starting point is the actuals unless it's considerably out of line, and that would come with some experience.
So I'm sitting there as an assessor and I've got a table I can look at and say, oh, those food costs should be 4% or 36%.
Right, Mr. Newman included in his brief our guide for 2020.
Yeah.
And as you can see in there, beverage hotels is a category on its own. Rooms expense, the average is 30%. Food and beverage cost, the average is 39% of revenue. Food and beverage wages, 34%. So we don't expect everyone to be exactly that because that's an average. But if we're seeing the rooms expense at 88%, we would say why. There's something else in there, or if it was 5%, we'd wonder why as well.
Depends on my question, Mr. Bennett. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. I just have one and curious as to, did you assume the 2020 Municipal Board appeal or?
Not yet. I call this an audition.
Oh, I see. Okay, fair enough. That was the only question I had.
Can I just though, just follow up?
So
You go ahead.
Well, on Member Whitbread's questions. This issue of financial statements, questionnaires, and occasionally they are not precisely the same. Because of course, accountants take information and financial statements are not always available at the time questionnaires are due. And then accountants take financial statements and they may classify things a little bit differently, put them on different lines. They may make certain adjustments. They should be relatively close, and these are relatively close as well. But you asked the question about industry statistics, and I agree with what Mr. Penner has said. I said to you uniquely, hotels use actual revenues and expenses, and I'm going to tell you uniquely, hotels are site-specifically valued in every case. No other property is done that way. It's all model-driven to begin with. And that's because of the unique nature of how hotel assessments are arrived at. They're a function of the performance of the business with removals to get out the non-assessable components, the business value and the chattels. And we haven't gone into a lot of depth about that because that's not in dispute, but that's how the model works.
Can I ask a question just while we're discussing at the risk of the time factor here? Are not gas stations done kind of the same way, revenue-driven components of the business? Okay.
No, gas stations, and I don't do many of those, but I think a lot of gas bars are done on a cost approach, which takes into account land value and the cost of the equipment.
We can leave that alone.
Because they don't trade in the market in a normal way. But coming back to what I was saying, this concept of industry statistics. And again, sometimes where you put things in a statement has an impact on how things appear. So in my rebuttal brief, if you look to the second page of my text, the first page was all the wages. But what I did, and I've just taken the assessor's numbers. So on the second page, you can see food and beverage sales as a percentage of food and beverage revenue. So food sales, 366.43, beverage sales, total revenues, $1,212,000. Food cost is 157, beverage cost is 320, the total cost is 478. As a percentage of revenue, that's 39.46%. And the manual says beverage hotels, their food and beverage cost should be 39%. And as Mr. Penner says, and I agree, not everybody's going to be precisely on that industry average. Things will move around a little bit. Then look at food and beverage wages as a percentage of revenue. So, and again, I'm just using the assessor's numbers. Food wages, 162, beverage wages, 155. The total is 321. So cost as a percentage of revenue is 26.55%. The manual says it should be 34%. So for some reason, this hotel in this year, based on the assessor's numbers, actually came in significantly below that industry average. Why? Well, look, it's a small business, okay? It's not the Fairmont. Sometimes you have a general manager who will not just be the general manager, but he will also be the guy who helps out in the restaurant when it's busy, the guy who helps out in another place when it's busy. And so rather than having a full-time dedicated employee in that department whose wages would then show up in departmental wages, somebody else covers for them, but their wages show up in A&G. And so when you look to the ratio, it isn't always going to look the way it should based on the industry averages. And the only reason I tell you that is because if you then brought it up to 34%, you'd need an extra 7.45% of revenue, which is an extra $90,000 of expense. What I'm telling you again is these numbers were very carefully done by the accountants. They're good statements, again, I repeat. And again, and I'm not being critical, but I did invite Mr. Penner, please look at the numbers. Let's see if we can sort this out. And as I asked of Mr. Penner, and as he said at the outset, really, he didn't investigate matters further. He was content to rely on the prior decision. Okay, I understand that. But part of the problem for this hotel is it's going to take the municipal board a long time to get to dealing with 2020 appeals. The cycle has been extended for a third year, and this hotel will now be in the position of paying a higher level of tax for an additional year before their appeal potentially gets dealt with. So for all of those reasons, I'm asking that you fix the value at $2,790,000. Thank you.
Gary.
Yes. Not to cast aspersions, but was this portion that is the discrepancy between your numbers and Mr. Penner's numbers comprising in part of the security? Was that just missed on the last presentation?
So I try to understand what happened, and God bless, we have video now, and I went back and looked. I went back and looked at the prior hearing, and I can only say that the way I've presented the matter today and the matters I have drawn to your attention, because when I was asked to look at this by the owner, the very first thing I said is, who did it before? Altus. I said, Altus know what they're doing. What happened? Why did it come out the way it came out? I looked very carefully, I dug through it, and for whatever reason, the missing security was not drawn to the attention of the panel. Certainly the panel did note that an area of difference seemed to be the A and G, where we're at 517, and the assessor totals 229 plus 128. So the assessor's at about 367 in total. We're at 517. A big chunk of it is the security, as I pointed out. There's also a big chunk of benefits that don't appear to be there. So there was a variety of things that caused concern. I can only say to you that I've approached it in the way I have. And as I said earlier, I've been doing hotels for a very long time. And these are the numbers, and this is what I believe the value should be.
Can I have a redirect? Question, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, but make it brief.
Of course. So I'm just having a look at the evidence presented, and the ask was exactly the same at $2,790,000 by Altus. So would they not have presented the very same information that you did today?
They may have presented the same financial statements, and they did. They presented the 2017 financial statement. But when I went and listened to the hearing, what I found was the drawing of the attention of the panel to the differences and the discrepancies was not done with the same level of detail that I have done.
Thank you. That concludes that matter. And the last one on the docket is 330 Kennedy. We have to cooperate. Period. Yep, okay.
That one was inspected in 2015 in regard to that 14 sale.
Okay, and what was the overall?
Oh, it it was in generally good condition. Like investigating the circumstances of the sale, but it was in good condition. So do we have time to get through this one, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I see there's an issue of non-cooperation. There is a hearing after us. Okay, there's our goal, 15 minutes. We can vary by 5.
We can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we
Can we not go till 12:40? I thought you said.
There's people in here that mainly are, they're gonna be here all day. They need, you have to be back in your
Okay, you're on base.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, this is file number 20-426. The roll number is 13099068930, 330 Kennedy Street, and the owner is Asan Corporation, Inc. The value of the roll for 2021 is $2,595,000. The assessor requests that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation under section 53(3)B of the MAA, and if a reduction in assessment is ordered, that it follows section 54(3.2) of the MAA. The evidence regarding this is page 4 and 5 of the brief, has those MAA excerpts. The mailer is included on page 10 through 12. I've included in my brief on pages 18 and 19 assessment and tax notices, just to show that those notices have been going to the same address as the mailer. Of note in this case is we did not send a registered mailer out to this owner. Just want to point out in Richardson, there's nothing in the legislation that requires a second request. We do that as a courtesy. Typically we would. This property was subject to a replot and roll number had changed. And because that roll number had changed, it didn't indicate in our system attached to this roll number that a second mailer should go out. That's the reason why. With regard to the mailing address, as I stated, the mailer is going to the same address as the assessment tax notices. Taxes are getting paid on this property. I just want to point out that under section 117.2 of the City of Winnipeg Charter, a notice, order, or document is deemed to be received by the person on the third day after it is mailed. So we mailed the mailer to the proper address, and it's deemed to be received by the person. So that's the nature of our request for non-compliance. I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Newman.
A couple of questions. Page 10 of your brief is the questionnaire.
Yes.
That's not the actual questionnaire that was sent out, is it?
I copied it out of the system, so it's probably not the actual paper copy.
But let me go a step further, just so we're clear. The city does not store a copy of every single questionnaire that goes out to every single property owner in the city, correct?
I can't say what they do to store.
What I'm going to suggest to you is that this document is a recreation in the sense that it takes the form and repopulates it with the address as of the date the original questionnaires went out, and repopulates it with the name of the owner, and that this is not the original questionnaire that went out. Do you agree?
I can't say.
Okay. My other question is, you've made reference on page 9 to section 117.2 of the charter. The request for information is issued in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act, correct?
Yes.
It's not a request that's issued pursuant to the City of Winnipeg Charter.
It's not issued pursuant to the charter.
So I would suggest to you accordingly, section 117.2 is of no application to this issue before us this morning or this afternoon.
I don't agree.
Okay, that's fair enough. And you made reference to the fact that Litcherson says you don't have to issue a second request, but in fact, it is the practice of the city to issue a second request by way of registered mail to all property owners who have failed to provide a responding questionnaire.
Yes.
Okay. And so not doing it in this case would not be equitable, I'll suggest, in relation to all the other property owners who did get a second request.
Could look at it that way.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Panel members, any questions? Quickly.
Yes. We heard testimony this morning from Mr. Taylor that standard documentation was included in previous case that we saw this morning, and that did include the registered letters.
Right.
And it's my experience that when we see validity in the mailers that go out, that second step is pretty standard for the city. And I'm just asking for confirmation, which I think Mr. Newman got. It is standard to send out a mailer that is registered.
Yes.
Thank you.
Carrie?
Was the second request sent?
Was the second request sent? No, it wasn't.
Okay, it's going to. Thank you.
Okay, I have no questions. We'll adjourn for,
No, I have a rebuttal brief on this issue. I will be quick.
okay,
Truly, I will be quick.
is it online?
Yes, it's online. Ignore the text for a moment. Go to the first page of the attachments. That is the title to this property. Mr. Penner has a portion of the status of title in his brief. He has the first 3 pages. The 4th page, which is page number 4 in the lower right-hand corner, shows the address for service for a sand corporation as being 35 Middlesbrough Cove, Winnipeg. Why do I draw this to your attention? Go to page number 6 of the attachments. Page number 6 is a decision of the municipal board in a case called Mo Investments. It involved the former Chicken Delight location at the corner of Corden and Stafford. The issue in this case was whether the mailer was properly delivered. Mr. McCubbin was the assessor. Turn to page 16 in the lower right-hand corner. Mr. McCubbin gave evidence that the requests for assessment information are sent using the addresses for service found in the Land Titles Office search of certificates of title. That's what happened in the Mo Investments case, but that was Mr. McCubbin's evidence. Keep turning the pages, and let's go to page 20 in the lower right-hand corner, which is the analysis and conclusion section of the board. And at the bottom, prior to ordering the deferral penalty, and this is at the municipal board level, but the same at the board of revision level, prior to ordering the deferral penalty, the board must be satisfied a request for information was made and it found its way to the owner. The assessor has the onus to establish these facts. It's not enough to say it went in the mail. And ultimately, the board in this case concluded that it would not impose the penalty because it was not enough to simply put it into the mail. In the present case, we have the circumstance where no second request was made, even though that is standard practice of the department. We also have the circumstance where the address for service in the title is a different address. And we also have the unusual circumstance, and look, none of us know. I know Mr. Penner doesn't know this. I believe that the questionnaire that he has put into his brief, starting at page 10, is a recreation. It's in my mind, clearly not the actual questionnaire that was sent out. And for all I know, all we know, no questionnaire was ever sent out, but the onus is on the assessor to establish receipt. That cannot be established in this case. Mo Investments says send it to the title. The address shown on the title, that wasn't done in this case. It's not equitable to not make the second request. Therefore, I'm asking you to deny the penalty. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a short minute recess if you gentlemen would like to leave the room. Thank you. The meeting will resume. The board has discussed the matter and we have denied the assessor's request for non-cooperation. So David, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've already read in the file number and pertinent details on page 1. Page 2, we indicate that there was non-compliance. We've heard that argument. My income approach summary is on page 6 of the report. On page 2, there's just a little information about this hotel. It's now known as the Hotel Royal Plaza, located downtown behind Portage Place. Cap rates are shown on page 3 of my brief, MAA excerpts on 4 and 5. Turning to page 6, here we have our stabilized workup, which in this case, and the reason for the request is clearly we have no financial information to base our assessment on. So we're left with stabilizing according to industry norms and our best guess at how this hotel would perform. And to that, we've generated an NOI of $274,752, a cap rate of 9%, taking 15% FF&E to derive the value of $2,594,878, $2,595 rounded. Page 7 is an aerial shot of where this is located on Ellis and Kennedy, right behind Portage Place. Page 7 is an overhead shot. Page 8 are some street views of this property, and top of page 9. Again, the assessor notes there we've already dealt with in terms of request. Page 10 is the blank mailer. Page 11 is the title here. Of note on the title on page 17, there's a $3 million mortgage registered on this property, which in and of itself is not proof of anything, but it does show how the banks viewed this property when the mortgage was granted, and mortgage values are often an indicator of actual value of the property. Page 18 and 19 are the assessment and tax notices, just to show that those have been going to the same address, 330 Kennedy Street. Starting on page 20, this is information provided to us by Mr. Newman in preparation for this hearing. This information was not available to us prior to the assessments going out. So that information is included on page 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. So now that we've had the chance to look at this information, we are able to enter the data in our spreadsheet and come up with the value. Now, I've shown all 3 years here, and our reliance is, as I've stated in the previous hearing, primarily on 2017. So we see revenues have gone up consistently throughout the period and peaked at $1,837,934 in 2017. Now, running all the expenses into the spreadsheet from the financials and using all of those actual financials for 2017, we would come up with an NOI of $596,074. And using a cap rate of 9%, we see there's a value here of $5,629,000, $5,630,000 rounded. Now, we're not here to ask for an increase in this assessment. We're merely putting these numbers in front of you to show that had we had the financial information in our hands, our value would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of $5.6 million. So we are left with an assessment of $2,595,000, which appears to be considerably low in comparison to the actual financials and stabilizing on that basis. Even if we were to suggest a slightly higher cap rate, given the location, we're still well in excess of the actual assessed value that went out. This further shows you the importance of compliance with our requests, and in this case, although we weren't able to prove our deferral request. We can see that this owner actually benefited by not providing that information in a timely manner. And his assessment is significantly undervalued in comparison to what the financials would indicate. So on that basis, I would ask the panel to confirm the assessment at $2,595,000. Thank you.
And just to clarify, you've never requested any increase in this?
We have not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Newman?
We've talked in previous, in the last hearing, and there was some discussion in the prior hearings about the concept of stabilization. Certainly, the department recognizes that as an appropriate concept to use in certain cases. Agreed?
That was a question? Yes, I agree.
Stabilization is an appropriate concept to be used.
Yes,
And in fact, your manual speaks of it, doesn't it?
yes.
So you made the suggestion that this owner has benefited because their property is undervalued, because it should be valued at $5,600,000. The 2018 assessment, if it had been appealed, would have had an April 1, 2016 value, which means the 2015 financial performance would have been used, correct?
Right.
And so with revenues of $641,000, what do you think the assessment would have been? Much less, right?
Much less than 5.6?
Much less, not only than 5.6 for sure,
Yeah.
but much less than 2.5 as well.
Yes.
Yes.
In fact, it
Okay.
was.
So, and the 9% capitalization rate that's being used, the downtown flag hotels, the Delta, the Radisson, the Fairmont, they get 8.5, correct? The Alt Hotel we just heard about earlier, it gets 9%, correct?
Yes.
You made reference to the location of this property, suggesting even a slightly higher cap rate to take into account location. This is not a great location, is it?
Well, it depends who you ask. Probably not ideal, but looking at what's happening downtown and the proposed revitalization of Portage Place, it may very well be that.
Sure. But at April 1 of 2018, none of that was happening, correct?
Not that I know.
And gentlemen, if it's a yes or no answer,
Of course.
yes or no, please.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
So, and just a couple of last questions, and I won't do as much by way of cross. I'll just present some evidence. The Quest Inn, just down the street on the corner of Ellis and Carlton, correct? Capitalization rate 11%, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Could be.
This is a budget hotel with no flag, no branding, correct?
Right.
And as a buyer, you're buying a future stream of income. Would I assume that I could generate $1,837,000 of revenue when the 2016 revenue was 800 some odd, and the 2015 revenue was 600 some odd? Would I fairly make that assumption?
I can't speak for a prospective buyer other than to say they would see an uptrend in financials.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barry? Richard? And I have no questions. Okay, Mr. Newman,
Okay, so
quickly.
yes, I understand. Some of us in this room are old enough to remember Kennedy Street when it passed between Ellis and Portage. We're old enough to remember there was a place called the Town and Country, famous nightclub in its day in Winnipeg. Kennedy was a busy street. That area was busy. There was lots happening down there. Eventually, this property came to be owned by the Gordon chain. It was the Gordon Downtowner for a lot of years. When North Portage redeveloped, eventually North Portage bought it from the Gordon chain. They put a hostel in there on a 50-year lease. It failed quickly. These people ultimately bought the property, and bluntly, it's been nothing but a struggle for them over the years. Mr. Penner points to the issue of the mortgage on the property at $3 million. Mr. Penner and I have had this discussion before. First of all, you need to understand that mortgages are frequently registered for amounts far in excess of what is being borrowed. Why? So they don't have to do an amending agreement if they want to advance additional money under the mortgage. Secondly, the balance under this mortgage at the end of 2017 was $1,100,000. There was never $3 million advanced under this mortgage. Thirdly, this mortgage is secured not just by this property, but the owners of this property also own the India Palace restaurant at 770 Ellis. It's secured by that property as well. Read nothing into the mortgage amount is my point. The real issue in this case is one of stabilization, and it's one of capitalization rate. So here's a property that in the 3 years, and again, let me say, I recognize the assessor had no information. So I get that. But here's a property, and if we go to page 16 of my brief, that is the workup. So there are the numbers. $584,000 of revenue in 2015, $875,000 of revenue in 2016, $1,834,000 of revenue in 2017. What the heck happened in 2017? Did somebody discover oil underneath this hotel? What happened? Well, the simple answer is disaster happened. What does disaster mean? Well, First Nations had fire. First Nations had flood. Manitoba Housing and Renewal owned an apartment building at 161 Smith Street. It had a flood. The pipes froze. All these people needed somewhere to go. Red Cross, various First Nations, they found some place to put them. The hotel had a bang-up year, one time. So disaster struck and the hotel did well because of it. The object of what we do here is to determine what a willing buyer would pay to a willing seller. So the question becomes, would a willing buyer pay $5.6 million, as Mr. Penner suggests, based on the $1,834,000 or $37,000 of revenue? The difference, by the way, is $3,000 of interest. Would a buyer pay based on $1,834,000 or $837,000? I suggest the answer is no. The buyer would see that as being very risky. And so what I have done on page 16 of my brief is I have done a workup where I have shown the 3-year average of total revenue. To be clear, the $3,294,000 average is total revenue. It's not room revenue. It's total revenue. The other revenues have actually been relatively consistent. So what I did is I took $1 million. If I were to use a 3-year average of room revenue only, that is $963,000. I took $1 million and I used that as my stabilized room revenue. And then I used essentially all of the same percentages that the assessor has used. And I used the actual taxes. I used the actual utilities. For repair and maintenance, I used the amount from the manual. But essentially, I was pretty conservative, tracking the assessor's percentages on all these numbers. And I used an 11.5 capitalization rate, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And that drove a value of $1,468,000. Now, I just want to talk about capitalization rates for a moment. And because I've been doing hotels for a long time, and because I do a lot of hotels to this day, and this is all reflected in our brief in the text at the second page, but there's a spectrum of capitalization rates. The Fairmonts, the Deltas, the Radisson, branded hotels, full service hotels get the lowest.
Can you summarize it quickly? Because we're at 12:38 now.
8.5 on those branded flag hotels, 9 on full service hotels, about a cut above, Holiday Inn Airport West, Canads, for example, 10% on the limited service properties, all those hotels around the airport, those newer ones. The beverage hotels go to 12. This hotel should not be any more than 10. It's in a rough area, a tough area. And there's no way this hotel should be getting a 9% capitalization rate if the alt gets a 9% capitalization rate. The Quest Inn gets an 11% capitalization rate, 2 blocks down the street on Ellis, very similar location, very similar type of operation. I've used 11.5. That's in your discretion, obviously. So 2 issues you really have to decide. What's the revenue number you're going to use? I've used stabilized number based on $1 million, which is actually $37,000 above the 3-year room revenue average. And I've used an 11.5 cap. That's my submission.
Thank you. Any questions, Dave? Gary? Richard? And I have no questions, and that concludes the hearing. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You have all the information, and